really important to get you on and to have you as part of this conversation, given the location of the city. I mean, smack in the middle of Hurricane Alley there, near the middle of coastal Florida and the Atlantic coast. So your location, what you're doing in the city is fantastic. So now, if we can just go back and use the EarthX panel of April 21st as really a basis for the conversation, even though we can veer from that as you wish. And tell us more about what you're doing in the city there and the region. But just to focus on what the panel was about, let me just read here. It says, the description of the panel: effectively responding to a fire, flood, or other weather disaster requires a whole systems approach, a coordinated strategy, including a strong chain of command, timely collaboration among various agencies and stakeholders, and a vision for long-term recovery. Making use of GIS and other land use tools to identify vulnerable infrastructure and critical assets, such as the electric grid, wastewater treatment, transportation, etc. So if you can just take us back briefly, what was your message in that panel? What did you want to say and to relate to the audience that you managed to do?
Yeah, well, when people think about South Florida, they immediately think about hurricanes. But I think the message for us is more about making sure that our water supply is viable. And when I first became mayor in 2011, we had entered into a drought time. And we are a surface water system, so we are dependent on rainfall and other sources of surface water to serve our public. And we were in the middle of a very significant drought in 2011. And we realized that we were going to have a tough time weathering this drought. Our water supplies were down very low, and we had to go on conserving water, rationing water. People had to stop watering their grass. People had to cut down their water use in homes, because we only had a couple of weeks of water supply left at that point. So that immediately was clear to us that at that point we better figure out how to harden our water supply, how to make sure that even in a 500-year drought, we were going to have water available for everybody in our city. Plus, we also serve the town of Palm Beach and the town of South Palm Beach. And we have 110,000 people who live in our city, but probably another 150 who come in to work because we are the county seat. So that really started us off on making sure that we know we're going to capture, we need to increase our supply of water. So we looked at how could we capture stormwater runoff that was running into the intercoastal, and we've redirected that water back into our system. We looked at how we're going to get water that we lose. Our water comes through a series of canals, and we lose water through evaporation and through seepage. And how are we going to grab that water that was going back into the groundwater? So we sunk a few wells to recapture that groundwater that we lost through the canals. We've also have a very large lake that's basically a retention pond where we take our water and bring it into our water treatment plant. And we did something as simple as lowering the intake on that, because that lake had gone down so low in the drought that we were just sucking in air instead of the water that was left. So we just lowered the intake. So we had to plan for a 500-year drought. We had to plan for our city growing. We looked at every every property in the city and projected it to its highest and best use, knowing and figuring out what that water demand would be and how are we going to meet that water demand. So that took a whole concerted effort. It took a focus by our city leaders, myself. I was really clear that I never wanted to have to go through a situation like that again, and that we were going to solve this. So since then, we have a drought plan in place. We have a long-term water plan in place. And if we had that drought this year, it wouldn't even be a blip on our radar screen. So we've prepared ourselves for that kind of a situation.
Fantastic. So the entire, the entire whole systems coordinated approach is something that you implemented in that particular crisis.
Well, and it's something we've taken, an approach we've taken overall for our approach to resilience. We are a STAR community, and we've earned a 4-star rating from the STAR rating system. And that's a system that looks at 7 topic areas and rates a city in each of those areas all around resilience. Some of that is financial resilience, some of it's equity, built environment. So it's a systems approach. The highest you can get is 5 stars. We're the only city in Florida that has a 4-star rating. And we're working on getting our 5-star to be one of a handful of cities in the country that have a 5-star rating. That's very much a systems approach. And what we've done is we've taken those areas that are in the STAR rating system and we've incorporated them into our strategic plan. So we're doing our strategic planning around those 7 topic areas of the STAR program.
Fantastic. Can you run us briefly through each of the 7 and just summarize the efforts across the board?
So I'm looking through the STAR program, and I don't know if you can see this, but it has the 7 areas, and under each of the 7 areas, it has some very specific topic areas, which is the built environment, climate and energy, economy and jobs, economic development, or education, arts, and the community, equity and empowerment, health and safety, and natural systems. So we have taken those 7 areas and we've incorporated them into our strategic plan. So our strategic plan addresses each of those 7 areas. And these are the 7 areas of the STAR system. So for example, in the built environment, they talk about a community water system. Under economy and jobs, they talk about, let's see if I can do this, workforce development and readiness. And so on each of those, they have sub areas as well that we can address. But we've taken that and we've done a real systems approach around the STAR communities, our strategic plan, and how to make sure that all of us here in the city are working on resilience, whether it's financial resilience, whether it's equity, whether it's natural systems, whether it's the economy. How can we be resilient?
The 7 areas are fantastic. The fact that you're taking a systems approach is exactly spot on. Question that I have for you, though, is in terms of the cascading effect of resilience issues outside of, what is the working relationship that you have with folks across the state and maybe even in other states as you build out some of these 7 components and try to strengthen each of them, knowing that you're not alone. Obviously, none of us is alone in any of this. And one of the big things in resilience nowadays is collaboration really across county lines and city lines and state lines.
Yeah, well, it's complicated. So we have an excellent working relationship with our neighboring counties of Broward and Miami-Dade. So Miami-Dade and Monroe County, which is Key West. So Monroe, Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County have been working closely together over the last couple of years, and we have a regional climate action plan that we've all agreed to and are working on regionally. We also saw that regional participation during the hurricanes. We thought that the last hurricane, Irma, was going to land directly on West Palm Beach. It didn't, it veered. And so Key West and Miami and the West Coast got the brunt of it. As a result, we sent our folks down there to help them. Once we were cleaned up, we had a lot of foliage damage, a lot of damage to our landscaping. But beyond that, we didn't have much structural damage. So once we got that cleaned up, our folks went down to Key West and Miami to help them out there. So that relationship is a really excellent one. Statewide, however, our state, our governor a few years ago proclaimed that the words climate change would not be used in his administration. So there's not a lot of support at the state level for climate change, resilience, work that we're doing here in the southern part of Florida. So that's why I say it's complicated. But we're fortunate to have really good partners with Broward and Miami-Dade and Monroe counties.
Now, in terms of future risks and what's your thinking and what is the thinking of that regional partnership that you have? And I mean, because we know from the science, from climate science, that hurricanes will be progressively worse, sea level will rise sooner than expected. Droughts, when they happen, they are expected to be progressively worse, ever longer and more frequent. So the preparation for that, or a resilience plan that contemplates not the previous experience and preparing for those 100 years and 500-year events, but now that these events are happening every 10 years or 5 years, and the frequency we know is a lot higher. We don't know, we can never know exactly when something like this is going to happen, but we do know it's going to happen a lot more frequently with a lot more intensity than ever before, right? So what is the thinking and planning in terms of building that resilience across the 7 components of the STAR program, energy and cities or the urban life and arts and culture and water and some of the other components facing, again, progressively escalating worse effects?
Regionally, just talk a little bit about regionally, if you look at Miami-Dade, they're much more susceptible to sea level rise than we are. We're have a little higher elevation here. And, so they're very focused on sea level rise. And what we're doing regionally is really sharing policy. So what kind of building codes do we have to have in place as a region to protect our built environment from sea level rise? What does that look like? And how can we share that across the region? Miami-Dade is really way ahead of all of us on that because they are in imminent danger. So I think that's the power of the regional compact, that we can talk to each other about what are the policies, what are the practices that have to be in place to make us resilient. We're also fortunate to have an outstanding relationship with our electric utility. Florida Power and Light is our electric utility. They're the largest producers of solar and wind energy in the country. And we have been working with them on solar installations and how we can bring more solar to our city. And they've been great partners in that as well. How can we make sure that people in our poorest neighborhoods, if they are without electricity for 2 weeks, or if they're without water for 2 weeks, how can we make sure that they're safe? Those are the kinds of things that we're talking about. And when it comes to the equity piece, are all neighborhoods equally protected? And what do we have to do to make sure that they are equally protected?
Fantastic, yeah. Now, going back to the 5 stars, when do you anticipate, is there like a timetable here of when West Palm Beach will be declared a 5-star city? And
I'm looking at Penni Redford, and Penni is our resilience and climate change manager.
Okay.
And she's the person who's made all this happen. I get to talk about it.
You want to put it on screen and have her speak as well?
Absolutely.
Hi there.
Hello, Penni. You want to introduce yourself and did you hear the question?
Yes, I heard the question.
Okay.
I'm Penni Redford. And I just want to add, no, everything starts at the top with leadership. You cannot do anything without the will. What I have is the time, and I'm also looking to the mayor for the money. So it takes political will, leadership, time, and money. So our 5-star goal, we will be up for a renewal in 2 years, but from the moment we got our 4-star certification, we really looked at that as a benchmarking exercise. We already knew we were doing some great things, but we want to have that continual improvement. And so we looked at what are the areas that we're strong in, what are the areas that we have some good opportunities in, and we've been focusing on those opportunity areas. And I am hoping that we will be a 5-star city with our next evaluation, which will be in about a year and a half.
Now, if I ask you in terms of the top 3 priorities in this process, in this 5-star and beyond process that you have on your plate, on your desk, on orders from your boss there, what are they? What are your top 3 areas to make West Palm Beach as resilient as any city in the country moving forward? Again, repeating what I mentioned earlier about these climate impacts becoming stronger and more frequent from now on.
I would say one very important aspect is community education. And our city can be a leader and an example, but we can't make the changes alone that need to happen. There are everyday activities that our residents and businesses need to do, and they need to know why it's important and how it can positively impact their bottom line if we're going in the right direction, and how potentially it could go the other way if we're not making these resilience plans. So we do a lot of community outreach. I just find it to be vitally important. People are interested in what's in it for me. And I don't mean that from a selfish standpoint. It's a survival. It's a natural standpoint. So that's definitely one of the top priorities that we will continue. We also are undergoing a resilience assessment, and we'll be developing a resilience plan that will be looking at climate resilience. I mean, we already have an emergency management plan and all of those other things that you would expect, but we are integrating this climate resilience and vulnerability aspects into our overall plan. We're working with NEMAC out of North Carolina, which is the National Environmental Modeling and Analysis Center. I had to look that up. And Fernley. So these are people that are heavily involved with NOAA and other government agencies to collect data and to be able to analyze that. So that is once we have that analysis in place, we will be able to have a list of projects and priorities that we can then work toward for more resilience. And then I'd say the third one would probably that it's sort of back and forth it's our buildings and our transportation. We do pay very close attention to sea level rise, and as the mayor said, we're not quite at the level by far of some of our sister cities, but we want to make sure we're ready.
And we are seeing increasing flooding incidences when we have heavy rains, so that's something we have to address.
And that goes to education too, because our CRS standings, we've done a lot of things within the cities to keep our flood insurance low and to help mitigate and make sure that we're not having flood issues, including a really visionary stormwater master plan that not only looked at the engineering, but really took into account the climate aspects of what kind of projects. Don't look at just historically what's happened and where we need to take care of, but what are the plannings for the future. The Southeast Florida Regional Climate Compact is the association that the mayor spoke about with Monroe, Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties. And they have a regional climate action plan that we've been incorporating. We're going to be adding a climate and energy element into our city comprehensive plan. And we also have adopted a unified sea level rise projection, which says that these counties, these 4 counties in this compact, are working together to make sure that we are resilient based on what the projection is of sea level rise.
Great, fantastic. And by the way, you mentioned modeling. Modeling, of course, has grown tremendously in relevance given these growing and worsening impacts. And to model future climate impacts and to be able to design policy today to meet those impacts that are coming down the pike has become a vital component of this planning process. So ecstatic to hear that you have that on your plate as well.
And that's really where the education of the community comes in, to have them understand why we may be making certain choices, that we're not just doing business as usual. We're looking ahead and preparing the community for the future.
Fantastic. Okay, well,
we got this to work out. That's wonderful.
Yes. No, I love it. And again, this video component is priced for people to see you and to hear you at the same time. So I want to thank you both for participating. Thank you again, and look forward to learning more and following your progress as you move forward in this agenda. It's very important, as important as it gets, right, to protect the community and the city from these coming disasters. So congratulations to both, and we'll be seeing you down the road.
Thank you so much. As I said, I'm glad we were able to have this conversation.
Thank you. Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Bye.